Hi there, and welcome to another BigLipz podcast. This is podcast number 6, I believe, of our second series, where we have made the jump from talking about movies to talking about television shows. So, in case you're not aware, my name is Sam Macaulay Blair, and I am joined as ever by the wonderful Kathryn Reese. Two of us are sort of former and current film students who obviously in our spare time decide to start talking about movies and now TV shows. So last episode we discussed the sort of hit Netflix series Arcane, which is a adaptation of the video game series League of Legends. So as a result, sort of keep it thematically appropriate, I thought for our concept-based episodes this week we would discuss video game adaptations. And we will be centering the discussion on TV shows, but we will also make mention of movies, just because the more stuff we have to talk about, the better. And I feel like video game to TV shows is a bit more of like a recent trend. I think they were sort of mostly being translated to movies for the longest time. So there's kind of a few more movies I feel like we can talk about than there aren't that many shows just yet. But anyway, getting straight into it. Kathryn, what are your thoughts on video game adaptations?
So this is generally not a genre that I would maybe seek out, if I'm being perfectly honest. And I was trying to think about why I haven't really watched them, and I think it's mainly just because I'm not, like, I've never really been super into games. Like, I like the games that I like, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like a handful of games, and one of them is The Sims, so I feel like that doesn't really count. I do think though, like you were saying, I think it's definitely, for TV adaptations especially, it's definitely like coming into peak time for game adaptations. I think that's probably to do with like the success of like Game of Thrones and the type of TV that, was that what you were going to say?
Yeah, it is actually, that's really funny.
Yeah, just the way that kind of changed TV, and like production values were a lot higher, and there's just a lot, especially because Game of Thrones is a good example, I feel, because it's got that kind of fantasy element that a lot of games have.
Yep, absolutely.
And yeah, I just feel like it works really well. Obviously, there's, as I said, a lot higher production value. I think the way that we watch TV has changed as well. We're a lot more into watching longer episodes of things as opposed to just week and a half hour shows. I think as well, I feel like if you were into video games, it would be such a cool like other level of like immersion and things like that. Like we've spoken before in a different podcast about like accompaniments to movies, and how I always like things like movie props or soundtracks and things like that. That's game adaptations are like a really cool way to do that for people who are into gaming, which I think is cool. I think as well it's like, if you're not as into gaming, it's maybe like a lazy man's way of playing a game, so you don't actually need to do any of the work. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, what are you more of a fan? Because we've kind of spoken about them before, but I've never...
Yeah, I mean, I'm more of a gamer to begin with. I love my video games, sort of have done since I was little, and you know, there's been points when I've sort of gamed a bit less, and since the pandemic I've started gaming a bit more, which is nice. It's a really nice sort of like way to switch off at the end of the day, I feel, like to just kind of get your head away from all the troubles of the day, of the modern world. And just kind of like sort of detach and disappear into a sort of another universe. But yeah, I think it's a difficult one, and it's interesting. I find it fascinating that there's been so many video game adaptations, and so few of them have been like, you know, any good. And there's yet to be, in my opinion, which I guess we'll kind of get into later on, there's yet to be like a great video game movie, which is just is kind of bonkers when you think about just like, because games, unlike movies and shows, games I think are a lot more limitless in terms of like their sort of format and their style, and you know, you get games like, you know, a game can be anything from like Pong to you know, Grand Theft Auto. You know, you can be the simplest thing in the world, or they can be sort of multi-layered, and you can have really rich narratives with sort of like compelling characters and stuff, and it can be sort of very cinematic. And I guess the thing that makes them difficult to adapt is obviously the fact that they're very sort of subjective experiences. You know, you do. I guess you bring a lot of yourself into the games that you play. There's a reason that, like, you know, for the longest time, video games or protagonists and the sort of iconic ones were generally pretty silent. It's because, like, people like to sort of imagine themselves in the shoes. And that
It's kind of like that thing that when you read about like teddy bears, they purposely have like neutral faces because you're meant to like put your emotions onto them. Video games is like just a more technical version of that, maybe.
I've never thought of that before, but that is such a great like leap. And I feel like there's probably like people in the games industry who would weep at that. All their like hours slaved to be reduced to teddy bears. But no, it's really,
just
really
like a teddy bear.
It's not that complicated. But no, you're right.
Exactly.
You're completely right. Like, it is. They are, like, generally, I think, the more successful games, and it's not always the case. You know, there are very successful, very like sort of strong narratively focused games, especially like nowadays when like graphical fidelity and stuff have improved. But yeah, I think like for the longest time, the more successful games were the ones that allowed you to sort of like use your imagination a bit more, bring yourself to it more. So I do think they were really tricky to adapt, and even things like pacing can be like difficult because again, like, you know, you can sort of play a game at your own pace, so it's quite difficult to then replicate that in a, you know, when you have like a created bit of content that you have to sort of watch at like a particular speed. You know, scenes have to kind of move in a particular way, and I think with regards to movies in particular, you know, games generally, they don't have to be. You get games that are quite short, but games generally are like at least, you know, even short games are generally like a few hours long. You know, they're still longer than a movie. So you are sort of, with movies in particular, you are sort of like you are sort of like constrained by like the format. But I think that's why, like you say, with the sort of like rise and success of Game of Thrones, why, like, you know, now that they are sort of being adapted to more TV shows, and I think that's why they are starting to find success there, because I've not seen tons, but I am aware that there's like a lot of shows out there that have like a lot of acclaim, and I feel like there's a lot of scope. There's definitely ones on the horizon as well that I'm like quite excited about, because I do feel like there's a lot of scope for success there. I think the longer sort of format suits it. So yeah, there's my very, very rambly sort of thoughts. Since you mentioned it, I'd like to ask, so you said you got a sort of selection of games that you have and do play. What games are they, other than The Sims?
Other than The Sims, I like the Assassin's Creed games. Mainly, much to most people's dismay, the kind of newer ones. So like Origins and Odyssey, and I've kind of started playing Valhalla as well.
Nice.
And then I try to think. I always have enjoyed a wee racing game. I'm not even gonna lie.
What's your fave, Mario Kart or Gran Turismo?
Well, when I was growing up, my brother, he always played Need for Speed, and sometimes he would save it, and then I would be allowed to drive about for a bit, and then he would turn it off without saving it again. So that was always fun. I always like games. I've never really, because my friend, she plays a lot of like really old games, like PlayStation 1 type games like Spyro and Crash and stuff like that, and she's always really preferred the games like that are more like free roaming. I always prefer the ones that are like have more of a structure to them.
Why is that?
I don't know. I think it just feels like, I feel like the wandering ones can be quite, I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like they're just a bit boring. Like, I like to have the story to kind of almost fall back on. Because, like, I think you play Assassin's Creed, so games like that, there's the kind of the story, and then you can do it at your own pace and do little things and explore, or like fully explore certain lands and then do it that way. But there's always quests that you need to go to.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Absolutely.
What about you? Do you have a specific type of game that you play? Are you console or PC?
Yeah, I'm console over PC. Love my consoles. And I think one of the benefits of that is they double up as sort of nice high end like sort of movie boxes basically. I got, one of the reasons I got an Xbox Series X last year was because I could then play 4K discs, and because I'd got a Kubrick set for my birthday which came with like The Shining and 2001.
Nice.
with 4K editions, and I was like, well, I need to I need to actually take advantage of that. So like the sort of multimedia aspects of it are like they are actually a big draw. Like, you know, being able to use like streaming services and stuff on them as well is always nice. Yeah, so I do actually get like quite a lot of use out of them, even beyond because even the years when like I wasn't gaming, when I was just kind of like out more, I would still use like the consoles all the time for watching things, or for even have people around. Like sometimes you put on YouTube or Spotify and you can play music and stuff through them. So yeah, no, I did big into my consoles, and I could, you know, once upon a time I probably would have been like a fanboy for one of the big three, like, you know, Sony, Nintendo, or Microsoft. But now I'm kind of like I love them all equally. They all have a place in my heart.
Love it.
Because they try and do different things for the most part, which I sort of like, because it means you can go to the different ones for different sort of types of games. But yeah, I'm kind of the same as you, to be honest. When you're saying about like, I'm not so big into your sort of infinite games. You know, I'm never really big into like Minecraft or all those sort of open world. Yeah.
Sorry, the pal that I was talking about, she used to always try and get me to play Minecraft, and I just find it so boring. I'm like, oh, so you go out and you mine all day and then you go back to your bed? Like, that just, it's absolutely no fun.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's too sort of tedious. It goes on. You have to put so much graft in to really like achieve anything, and
minimal reward.
Yeah, exactly, and I understand why people are sort of drawn to it. But yeah, for me, it just like I quite like, especially just now since I've got back into gaming. There's just like the biggest pile of games that I have like not played over the years that I've been like meaning to get on top of. So the last like year and a bit, I've just been like powering through as many games as I can, and it's such a nice experience. Like so because of that, I quite like your sort of linear games as well. Again, they're not really in fashion at the moment, but I quite like it when there's like a set structure and levels, because I feel like there's a better sort of pace to the game, and I like the sort of narratives as well. I think, you know, one of my favorite games of all time, which only came out a couple of years ago, is The Last of Us 2, and that game is like so narrative focused, and it for me, I had such like an emotional experience playing it. And obviously a big part of that is like the length of time that you're in the story, in the world, but also just like the fact that you are like, you know, the game gives you as much control as it can, so you do feel like you do feel connected to the characters and their actions, because like you have basically helped them perform them.
I wondered if we like narrative focused games because of our interest in film. I think we just can't escape it.
I think for me that's definitely part of it. Like I think I remember getting more and more excited by like games, because again, you know, when I was a kid and stuff and played games, it probably was more about just like exploring and the actual gameplay and stuff. Also because like games weren't that narrative focused back then. But I think like, you know, as sort of like games have become more complex, I've just been like constantly blown away by like what they're doing with their storytelling. And yeah, I do think it is completely connected to like my love of like cinema and shows and even like books and stuff. I think it's just exciting to have like another format in which like stories are told. And yeah, there's just like the ways in which like storytellers can be creative with their storytelling in video games. Have you ever played the game Portal?
No.
No. So it's like a sort of puzzle game. The first one I think is like ridiculously short. Like I think you beat the first one in like half an hour, if you're very quick. And then they made it like a proper, and it doesn't really have much of a story or characters or anything. And then it's more just like about, because it's sort of like physics based, and as you'd expect, it's all about like opening portals, and you kind of use them to solve puzzles. And then they developed like a proper sequel, which had like actual writing and voice actors. You know, it has Ben Wheatley? No, that's a director. Stephen Merchant, but he plays a character called Wheatley. That's where I was getting confused. Yeah, Stephen Merchant is like one of the main actors in it, and J.K. Simmons has like a fairly big role. And yeah, it's that to me was like one of my favorite games. But it's so good because there's ways in which it uses gameplay almost like, and gameplay mechanics almost like. And I think Naughty Dog is quite good for doing this with their games as well. They use them almost like sort of writing, like sort of like story beats, or sort of like little narrative. I guess almost like Chekhov's gun type things, where, you know, little seeds that are then like developed and then paid off later on. I'd find that fascinating. Like taking, you know, basically it's like using a writer's approach to developing a game, and the sort of like seamless connection between like narrative and gameplay, and just when the two of them sort of like are working in tandem, it is just like, I think it can be really, really like impressive to see. You know, it does feel like really, really clever to sort of witness. So yeah, again, very long and sort of rambly, but generally those are the sort of games I like. Although that being said, I had like a Mario sort of like period of a few months last year where I just sort of played all the 3D Mario games because I'd only played a couple of them, and that's a bit as far from like narrative based as you can get.
Yeah, that's very true.
But I had like the best time with it, and I think part of that was kind of like what I was saying there, where every sort of level in like say Mario 3D World introduces like a new mechanic, and then sort of develops that mechanic, and then you sort of have to like master it throughout the level. And I think that's just like a really interesting idea, because it just feels like you're in this really creative space all the time, and you know, the bright colors and happy music kind of help as well.
Mario is very fun. Like, it's always, even if you're getting annoyed that you can't beat the level or whatever, it's still, and it must just be like the bright colors and the kind of otherworldly feel and things like that. It's just good fun.
Exactly, yeah, it's a very happy sort of place, the Mushroom Kingdom.
It doesn't give me the rage the way that maybe Assassin's Creed does at times.
Yeah, that is very fair actually. Assassin's Creed can definitely be. I don't know, actually, to be fair to say that, there was points in, I think it was Mario Galaxy 2. I remember there was points in that where I got like fairly annoyed with. I think it was just like some of the challenges you have to do at points, where I remember being like very vocally annoyed at the game, and I was like, "Oh, my flatmates are probably hating me right now."
Yep.
But yeah, no. So those are generally my thoughts on games in general, and obviously the adaptations. So I guess moving on, talking more specifically, do you have any favourites of any adaptations?
I think to be honest, I think I've seen max like 2 TV adaptations of video games. One of them being Arcane, which I would definitely choose as my favourite. So, but obviously we spoke about that at length last time. But when I was thinking about this, I thought it was interesting that even after I've seen the show and I really enjoyed it, I've got absolutely no desire to play the game. Yeah. And I think that's partly kind of what we were talking about last time. Like, it just doesn't look very good. Like, that kind of aerial view of little blurred figures kind of wandering about doesn't, that's not really my kind of thing.
Yep.
And when we were talking about games that we would play, I would probably close to never be inclined to play like kind of online games like that, just because I don't have any interest in them, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. It just, I know people that are so. I mean, my brother is really big into. I've got friends that are really big into like their online gaming, and I can understand why, because it's a form of like socializing. But yeah, I'm the same. Like, I'm quite happy just disappearing into my like narrative experience. I don't really need a digital space to like hang out with people. Again, the sort of endless nature of it as well, I just kind of find a bit dull. Do you ever do like local like sort of like couch like sort of multiplayer games, you know, where like you have like split screen? Do you ever do any of that?
I think the only time I would have done something like that would be like Mario Kart.
That's like I mean, you don't really, it's not something you really get as much of now, because obviously since online gaming's become a thing, there's just not really like a market for it, or the same market for it. But I that's definitely like, that's like the only sort of gaming multiplayer that I like. And I think like Mario Kart and even like Mario Party and stuff like that can be it can be like perfect for it, because it is quite fun it is quite like satisfying to like beat someone at a game when they're sitting beside you.
Yeah, 100%. I did it recently. Like, I've got a Switch, and I was playing with my nephew at Mario Kart, and he's only like he's young, so he was pretty rubbish. But he was like, he wasn't in the room, and it was really weird, because obviously he wasn't in the room, he was at his house and I was at mine. But I don't know if you can, but I could barely get the Mario Kart set up for us to play. So there wasn't any, like, we weren't speaking to each other or anything like that, so it was just silence. I was sitting there just racing each other. It wasn't the most fun experience, I've got to say.
Yeah, that is fair actually. I can imagine that not being like great. And I think that's it. Like, I think I don't have any desire to sit with like a headset on and coexist. I think like when someone else is in the room, there's just something like nicer about it. It feels like a proper social experience then. But even then,
that was like kind of. I feel like for me anyway, the kind of online stuff feels like it's trying to be social, but it's just not quite, or maybe just not the way that I would want to play it.
Exactly. I guess it's like the difference between like having like a Zoom call and drinking with your friends and actually sitting in like a as we all kind of experienced in the pandemic and actually sitting in a bar with like people. It just doesn't, it's like trying to be something, but it's not quite succeeding. And it's like maybe the closest thing you can get, but it's just it's not the same. And I would take the actual physical interaction experience any day.
100%. Was there any the other thing I just wanted to say about like on this kind of topic was, and we've touched on it before, that I think I feel like this is definitely the time, if you were going to get into TV game adaptations, this would be the time, because there's some, especially I think we'll discuss later on, but there's like more and more upcoming ones that just production value is just there, and it's gonna, like we were talking about with Arcane last week, where you can tell they put a lot of time and effort into it, and it wasn't just like a kind of quickly put together thing. So I think there's definitely, I feel like it's not that I don't have any favourites because they're all bad. It's just not something that interests me normally.
That's fair. I mean, I'm pretty much the same. Like again, even though I love gaming and stuff, there's actually very few TV show wise anyway. There's very few adaptations that I've seen, and I think it's because like they generally. There's been some like ones that have come out that I've heard really good things about. Arcane obviously being one of them, and I don't doubt I'd probably enjoy them, but I'm just not rushing to see them because I don't have that like loyalty or familiarity with like the IP. And yeah, it's nice to know that they're there, but like I haven't really checked most of them out just because like. Yeah, when they make adaptations of things that I've like played and stuff, I probably will be more inclined to. Well, I mean, there have been some that I've like checked out, but yeah, like I do agree that like I'm kind of the same where, I haven't actually seen like tons of them. What about movie wise? Have you seen many like movie adaptations?
Movie wise, again, actually, and it was very funny that it worked out. In like fairness wise, I've seen like two game adaptation like movies, whereas I've seen two TV shows as well, and they were Assassin's Creed, if you can believe it, and the other one was the new Lara Croft one. I think it was 2018.
Was 2018. Funnily enough, the sequel to that he's no longer doing it, but the sequel to that was going to be directed by Ben Wheatley. Just because I mentioned. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's weird that kind of
funny. I love that you just bring it back round.
Yeah. I knew my brain had that name in there for a reason. I've seen that one as well, actually. Have you seen the Angelina Jolie ones?
No, I haven't.
No, neither have I.
No, that's funny because my cousin, when we were growing up, my cousin like was obsessed with Lara Croft. He had like these like proper like statues and things. They must have cost a fair amount of money, and he had loads of them. But no, I've actually never seen it. I imagine they would be good in that kind of like 90s kind of mummy vibe going on, I feel.
Yeah, I'm
maybe not quite as funny.
I'm so with you that is I think that's my like my without having seen it, that's exactly what I sort of think of it as well. I don't think that's the thing. I don't think I would like almost like Charlie's Angels type thing as well. It's where it's like I feel like I would enjoy it. I would if I put it on, I would enjoy it, but I'm not going to be like blown away by it. But that's fine. Like I don't think I would ever.
One of those movies where you're like, sorry. One of those movies where you're like, yeah, that was good, but you would never be like, oh, let's watch Lara Croft.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not going to argue with someone putting it on, but you're not going to race to either. And I'm with you. Funnily enough, though, it was actually talked about. Appearance, and a lot of people were talking about it over the last week because they filmed part of one of the films in Cambodia where I was. We went around this temple where everyone just kept saying, "Oh yeah, they filmed Tomb Raider here," and I was like, "I haven't seen it." And we went to a bar that apparently Angelina Jolie had been to when they were filming it because they have a cocktail named after her. So.
Oh wow.
I know. So it's again weird that just like connects. What did you think of the 2018 one?
I actually quite liked it, if I'm honest. I felt like it was exactly what you knew, what you thought it was going to be. It was quite actiony, a bit over dramatic, but it was a pretty fun watch, I felt. And I haven't. Did you play the game?
I did, yeah. So I've not played I never really played the original games, but I did play because they rebooted it in
Oh,
the
because they brought out a new
new.
one. Yeah, it was meant to be a
Yeah,
lot harder.
it was really good. It was more. It's funny because it's more like sort of Uncharted-y, which is obviously funny because like Uncharted was very much like inspired by Lara Croft in the first place. So it's weird that they've now created this like feedback loop, where they've inspired each other. But I think it was 2012 or 2013. The first rebooted game came out, and I remember playing that and was absolutely blown away by like how much I enjoyed it. I thought they did a really good job of like it felt like sort of grittier and more realistic. Lara Croft has a hard time in that game.
The new Lara Croft actually is one that I wanted to play. It was one that I was like aware of and that I wanted to play, but I just never got around to it. I think it was like that thing we spoke about before with TV shows where I just felt like it was going to be too much of. I was going to have to sink too much of my time into it.
Yeah. Yeah, fair. I'd say it's worth checking out. I don't think it's not like a super small game, but I don't think it's not as big as Assassin's Creed, that's for sure.
Fair.
And it is quite linear, which is like quite nice. So you do kind of move from like action set piece to action set piece. But yeah, I played that one. I think I played half of like the sequel and then never played the third one.
No.
And I never played the third one just because I only played half of the sequel. And I think I only played half of the sequel because like the game, for some reason, it just wouldn't load my save. Like I tried to play it one day and it just like wouldn't load my save, and I was like, well, I'm halfway through the game, so I'm not deleting my save and starting again. That'd be mental.
Yeah, and then you just never ever go back to it.
Yeah, literally, yeah. So it's just been abandoned. So sorry, lad.
Aye.
But yeah, I enjoyed the movie well enough. I thought the game was better than the film, but I thought the movie was just like a sort of a decent enough romp, and it was like quite cool seeing like some of the set pieces from the game being like, oh, that's it in the movie now.
Yeah, that was true. The other one in terms of like.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
What you said?
No, I was going to say in terms of like Assassin's Creed the movie. One thing that I hate about the Assassin's Creed games is when you're not in the Animus thing. Like I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not playing this to be a researcher. Do you know what I mean? I would go and play a different game. Like that's not what I want to play. I want to play like the character in ancient Egypt or in an old timey Viking. I have no interest in the people who are just lying in a bed somewhere hooked up to the Animus. Do you know what I mean? Where I feel
exactly.
Like
There's a reason.
Sorry.
I was gonna say there's a reason. Yeah, there's a reason that it's not like the. You know, because technically you're playing it from like the protagonist that you play as in the game is the person in the present day or future, but there's a reason that they're not the person on the box. Like you say, it's not why anyone's in those games.
100%, and I feel like the movie very much focused on like Michael Fassbender's character in the present, where I'm like, I don't care about him at all. Like, what? I don't want to watch this. I don't want to watch all the boring bits. Like when I'm playing Assassin's Creed and they like have to leave it for whatever reason, I just get raging because I'm like, it's normally a part of the game where you've got all these skills now and you've got all these weapons and things, and then you're suddenly just like a normal person where you don't. Do you know what I mean? You can't even climb a wall. It's infuriating.
It's weird. It is. It's weird how boring they make those bits. I guess they did try because in the original sort of because I've played sort of up to Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and then I kind of fell away from it just because I was like kind of got a bit burnt out on it, and I went from absolutely loving it to just very quickly being a bit like, okay, that's quite enough Assassin's Creed for a while, and I've been meaning to check out the new ones because I actually have heard really good things and I've heard they're quite different, but again I think it's that thing of like I've also heard that they are massive games.
I'm playing in the middle of like Origins just now, and I've no joke been playing it for like years. Like I've completed the main story, but oh my god, it's just endless. And then of course I bought the I can't remember what it's called, the DLC or something.
Yeah.
I bought that as well, so there was another storyline that I had to complete and all these other things. So it is a bit of an endless task, which I think does put me off sometimes, because you can obviously get you can kind of do your own kind of like checkpoints where you can complete something and then stop, but when you get so far into the game there's like forts and stuff like that are just enormous, and it takes you like hours and hours to like clear them all, And sometimes I just don't have it. I just don't have it in me.
Yeah, I recently got and sort of started playing Elden Ring. I got it when it sort of came out just because I never really played any of those games before, and I was like, okay, well, if ever there's a time to sort of jump on and start playing these, it's going to be Elden Ring because it's the first open world one. It's supposed to be like more accessible because of that. George R. R. Martin's involved. And yeah, it just is. The game is just like so difficult, and I'm not really used to like the sort of rhythm of the gameplay, and it just like keeps kicking my ass. And it's got to the point now where I'm like, I've just started playing other games because I'm like, I don't want to boot up a game, play it for like 2 hours, and make like an inch of progress. Like it's just not. That,
yeah, be no further forward.
Yeah, it's just not that rewarding, and it's the art style's beautiful. The like character designs and stuff are stunning, and I like to think that I'll go back to it and maybe like slowly sort of chip away at it over time. But I think it is like it will take me literally years to beat the game, and I don't want to just play that for years because there's also not much in the way of a story. So there's not even like narrative hooks to kind of draw me back in. All the sort of
is
lore.
it kind of similar to like Skyrim and
even then like even then they have more of like a story than Elden Ring because like I guess you do have like NPCs that you go up to and you can interact with in Elden Ring, but they're sort of very few and far between. So it does feel like I think apparently there is like a lot of like really rich lore. Obviously George R. R. Martin sort of helped develop it and stuff. So I don't doubt that it's really interesting.
The king of lore.
You do. Yeah, he does. Yeah, is that, isn't he? But yeah, I think there's just sort of too much work that you have to put in to kind of get it, and I don't think it's like delivered in the most exciting formats either. So yeah, I just don't have like that same pull to go back and like conquer it. It just feels a bit like masochism to me. I was going to ask before, have you seen? Because I completely agree with you on Assassin's Creed. I've not actually seen the film. I think I've started watching it and gave up. And which is mental because again, like I had a lot of hopes. I'm a huge Michael Fassbender fan. And what's the director? I can't remember his name. But him and Fassbender did just before they did Assassin's Creed. They did Macbeth. Have you ever seen that film?
I haven't. No.
No. So I mean, I sort of struggle with Shakespeare. I've never really like spent that much time with like Shakespeare's work, so whenever I watch like a Shakespearean film or anything, the language just completely throws me. I just don't understand what anyone is saying at all. And yeah, so they did. I went to see Macbeth and struggled with it. I had no idea what was really going on verbally. I was just there for like the images really, but the acting was phenomenal. The direction was incredible. It was like I thought it was like probably the best. I've not seen the new tragedy of Macbeth, but I thought like that 2015 Macbeth was like pretty much as good an adaptation of Macbeth as you could make. And I liked just how serious it sort of took it. It felt like a really like faithful sort of serious adaptation, which I feel like at that point in particular wasn't really the sort of like the done thing.
Because there was a long phase there where there was a lot of like movies like She's the Man and 10 Things I Hate About You that were Shakespeare works that were adapted into like teen rom-coms.
And even like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, where you have like a sort of and I remember there was like I think it was like a play of Hamlet that was around that sort of time as well, and that had like Benedict Cumberbatch with a gun. So like there is
always I feel like they was that like an adaptation where they had kind of tried to make it modernized, or was it very
I think so. I just remember I never saw it. I just saw it was when cinemas had started showing like plays for the first time, and I remember it was just always in like trailers for like plays that they would show. Just Benedict Cumberbatch cutting about with like a gun and like saying Hamlet over the top of it. That's all I know about it. So I assume it's like a modern day update, which of course Benedict Cumberbatch would be involved in that. As his thing, isn't it? But yeah, it just as a result, I was then like, okay, the fact that they've actually like just been like completely faithful to the Macbeth adaptation, I was like, I really appreciate that. But yeah, I thought they did a phenomenal job there. And again, it's Assassin's Creed, like, it feels like the perfect thing to adapt because, like, all the games have their own sort of setting and protagonist. It's, like, such a blank slate with that. And I think they even said that the movie was going to actually, rather than, because I guess that's the other thing as well, is, like, whenever they make these adaptations, they usually like wipe the continuity. You know, they're usually like, well, this is its own movie continuity rather than like fitting into the games. Even if it just follows like the same sort of plot beats and stuff, it is still like its own telling. Whereas like I think they said with the Assassin's Creed movie, it was going to actually fit into the continuity. So I was like, okay, that's that's an added like bonus that the film has, is it's part of like the pre-existing lore. And even then I remember hearing that it wasn't great, and then like I said, I started watching it and I was like, I cannot believe how like uninterested in this film I am.
There was like cool moments where like you're talking about where you found out how like you got specific weapons and things like that, but they were so few and far between that you would, as you did, easily give up before you even got to those points. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it just there's so many cool parts to Assassin's Creed and so many cool things that you could do visually. And again, they seemed like the team behind it seemed like people that really knew what they're doing. But it just felt like a bit of a mess. It just felt so impressively bland. Is probably,
yes.
I would describe it.
Bland is such the perfect word. Like, it wasn't. I wouldn't be angry, like, you know how when some movies are so bad that you get angry?
Yeah.
I'm not angry, I'm just complete indifference.
Yeah, that's it. It's just the most like indifferent experience you can ever have. So yeah, no, not crazy on that one. Have you ever seen Detective Pikachu?
I haven't, no, because it's Ryan Reynolds, am I wrong?
It is Ryan Reynolds, not Danny DeVito, sadly, who I think they were going to cast at one point.
If it had been Danny DeVito, I would have watched it.
I thought it was okay. Like I didn't love it the same way that some people did. It felt quite cool to see something like a sort of like an actual like sort of live action like Pokemon film, and it was quite interesting, just like the mechanics of the world building and stuff like that. But yeah, I wasn't like blown away by it, and I'm pretty sure the whole film I just kept thinking, you know, and I like Ryan Reynolds, but I'm pretty sure I just kept thinking like, oh man, if this had been Danny DeVito, it would have been so much better.
Yeah, there's not many a role that Danny DeVito couldn't improve.
Exactly, exactly. Some guy. But yeah, no, it's probably one of the ones I've liked more, but it's still, you know, again, as we sort of established, the bar isn't very high here. Have you ever seen Need for Speed, since you mentioned playing the games?
I haven't, and I remember at the time it came out and people basically said it was god awful.
Really?
But I haven't seen it. I did always like it because it felt a bit more like, because what was the other one? There was Need for Speed and then there was another kind of similar. I can't remember what I'm thinking of. I think they also made a movie about that. But
yeah.
Or I'm maybe getting confused and thinking of like Fast and Furious. And I remember thinking at the time that Need for Speed I would prefer to have watched that, but I didn't watch either. So
fair enough. And I'm not really a Fast and Furious fan either. I did see Need for Speed. I saw it on the back of someone's recommendation. They absolutely loved it.
Oh, yeah?
And it was, from what I remember about it, which isn't tons to be fair, it was just like pretty solid. I think I was just pretty much on par with like the Tomb Raider movie.
Yeah.
It's that level of enjoyment basically. Probably a bit more interesting because like, again, it's like sort of a blank canvas one. It's not like it's adapting the game's story. It just kind of tells its own story, but with cars. But yeah, and I thought it was fine. Aaron Paul's, you know, always great. So he's a nice sort of plus. And then I think other than that, like have you ever seen the Resident Evil movies?
No, is that with
Mila Jovovich?
Yeah. I haven't actually, because I remember my dad was watching it once and I came down the stairs and this was when I was like 15, 16, so peak like insufferable female teen. And I was like, what is this you're watching? And I remember it so distinctly. Obviously, she's pretty sexualized in the show, in the movie, sorry. And it was just this ridiculous like monster thing, and she was like sliding all about the floor and she slid underneath his legs and like shot him. And I was like, this is just not for me. It's not my cup of tea. I don't think I'm the intended audience here. So, no. Yeah. But my dad likes them. Everyone else I know that has seen them is normally male, and they all enjoy them. So,
Well, to adhere to the stereotype, I think I've seen I've not seen all of them. I've seen most of them, I think, and I've seen them out of order as well.
Yeah.
I had
I
a
don't imagine
flatmate.
that would have made a huge difference, though. In fairness.
No, no. I mean, they're very accessible. But I had a flatmate who was obsessed with them, but not seriously obsessed with them, but more in a this is so bad it's good type obsession.
Yeah.
And I'm so with them in that. I think we watched a couple of them together, and I was like, actually, I totally get where you're coming from with this, because there is a sort of. I respect the fact that they're all 90 minutes. They are literally just they're over and done with so quickly.
Yeah, that's fair. You have to respect that. If they know what it is, they know exactly what they're putting out there. Then, do you know what I mean? If they're under no illusions that it's Oscar bait and stuff.
No, yeah, that's it. It does very much seem to be they don't seem to be taking it that seriously. And there's a lot of just they're really over stylized in a really sort of funny way. Like you say, the sort of slow motion slides and stuff, and I think there's a lot of stuff like that is actually just quite hilarious. And I love the fact that they all end on a really ridiculous cliffhanger as well, which is then usually resolved immediately at the start of the film.
Within 3 seconds of the opening of the next movie.
Yeah, it's nuts. You would think it would be the springboard for the next movie, but it's usually just immediately sidelined, and then they just kind of do their own thing. But yeah, no, I actually I think the highlight has got to be the fourth movie. Just for I went to see that in the cinemas, and that was it came out when 3D was basically just blown up. It came out literally 10 months or something after Avatar, but they had actually filmed it using the same cameras that they used to film Avatar. So it was the only film that came out. It was one of the few films that came out within the whole 3D fad that actually did deliver on the 3D, because it wasn't done in post production. It wasn't a post conversion thing, because they'd actually filmed it. The 3D was really really good. And again, with the movie having all these slow mo dramatic sort of moments, it worked so well, because it's just
I can imagine.
built for it. So that was seeing the fourth one in cinema was definitely the highlight of the series for me. But yeah, they're I do think they're sort of fun, but they're far from great movies.
Yeah. Have you seen the new Sonic movie?
I've not, no. I don't really have any sort of loyalty to the.
No, did you play Sonic when you were young?
Not really, no.
I didn't either. I didn't get it. Even as a child, I was like, "What? This is really boring."
Yeah. I think I was the same, to be honest. I think I had one for the DS, and it was okay, but I think I was even aware of I was okay, I got lucky with enjoying that Sonic game.
Yeah.
I was I was almost okay, I don't need to go near another one, because I've had a positive experience and I can leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, it's weird, because it's such a big franchise, and such a big there's so many games, and there are meant to be some great ones, but yeah, I haven't ever really gone near it, and I'm interested. I'm kind of interested in seeing the new movies just for Jim Carrey.
Yeah, that was kind of why I wanted to see, well, wanted is a strong word.
That's it. Yeah, I'm not going to ever go out my way to see them, but it's the same as Tomb Raider. It's if someone ever puts it on, I'm not going to stop them. I couldn't watch it. So
yeah, 100% same.
But yeah, I'm quite happy. I think the thing that I really like about them is that they are doing well. But I love the fact that they had that first trailer that came out, and then they had that terrifying, horrendous design for Sonic.
Oh,
but for the first time ever, the studio were actually okay, do you know what? You're right. We're just gonna change it.
That's not working. Yeah.
And they've fully embraced the sort of fandom in that way, and I really appreciate that, the fact that it looked like they saw what worked with the first one, and they sort of doubled down on people's love for the games. So I'm happy that people are sort of happy with them. But yeah, they don't really I'm not going to rush to see them. So I guess we kind of talked about this already, but are there any other sort of least faves then, ones that you've not really enjoyed?
One that I wanted to mention was The Witcher.
Okay, have you seen it?
Yeah. And in my notes, I've written, essentially, there's only one thing that I can remember about The Witcher, and it wasn't the plot. So, let's put it that way. Yeah, I think maybe for one of the reasons men seem to like Resident Evil is maybe the reason that I like The Witcher. No,
Fair enough.
I'm not I don't know if we've spoken about it before, but I'm not massive on fantasy as a genre. I don't particularly like fantasy books. I'm not massive on fantasy games that are just like, I don't mind a wee bit. I can deal with a wee bit if it kind of makes sense in the world, like Harry Potter or whatever. Game of Thrones is fine as well. But examples, and I'm sorry, Sam, but Lord of the Rings is just too much fantasy for my liking.
That is fair. Lord of the Rings is very, very fantasy.
Yeah, and I think The Witcher it felt very like that. There was all these like, maybe I'm just lazy, maybe I just can't be bothered learning the names of these monsters and places and people and things like that. But there was a lot of that in The Witcher.
Yeah.
I mean, there was points as well where I felt like it didn't look great.
Okay.
Where I feel, in my opinion, it looked very much like they were on a set.
Yeah.
And there's a big green screen type thing. Which isn't really what I want, and especially when we're now used to kind of big scale TV shows, which I think that felt like it was trying to be, but it wasn't quite keeping up.
Yeah.
I think as well, just generally, I potentially wasn't paying attention, but I feel like it wasn't very memorable. Like, I can barely remember any of the plot points, but as I say, that could have been that I wasn't paying attention because I wasn't particularly enjoying it. So
fair.
There is that. One thing I wanted to mention, which I hadn't ever heard of, but I stumbled across it while I was doing research. Did you know that there was a Candy Crush TV show?
No, I had no idea.
It was cancelled after one season, right? And basically the floor, it was just like a game show, and the floor was the Candy Crush kind of gameplay board thing.
Yeah.
And people were suspended in a harness, like lying flat on their stomach, and were suspended over the game floor, and they would make the matches that way. Like, who greenlit that and then allowed it to go on for a season?
My God.
That's such a bizarre one as well, because games like Candy Crush, watching other people play it is not fun.
No,
you
not
can.
at all.
There's some games that are like exploratory games. Some people watch like streams of people playing them. That's fun, but no one watches streams of people playing Candy Crush. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like, yeah, it does not translate into like being watched, does it? And that's a good point with like the whole mention of streaming as well, because like you have games like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, which I think are a really good marriage of like story, but also you can do a lot. Like, you know, you can go off and sort of explore and do your own thing, and they are perfect for like watching other people play. Because you can be quite creative with what you're doing. But yeah, a game like Candy Crush is just frustrating to watch other people play.
Yeah, because I feel like you've got your own little system if you're playing games like that, and then when you're watching other people, all you want to say is, no, do it that way, do it that way, do it that way.
Exactly,
like,
yeah, you just become like a backseat sort of like player.
Yeah,
because like, again, I mentioned Portal before. Portal is like, I loved Portal 2, but I remember watching like a streamer playing Portal 2 like literally back in the day, and yeah, it was just like you just getting constantly aggravated because when you know how to solve the puzzle, it's then just frustrating to watch someone struggle to solve it.
Yeah, 100%. But I thought that was such a random choice that I felt like it needed mentioned.
That's fair. I've got a few written down that sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to ask if you'd seen The Witcher.
No, I actually haven't, and it's because I've not got around to playing the game. I will at some point, I imagine. I've only ever heard good things, but again, it's one of those games that I'm aware is like massive. So I know that if I start playing it, I'm going to be in it forever. Also, it's funny because I really like, you know, a huge fan of Lord of the Rings. Love Game of Thrones, but I guess like I like fantasy, but I think a lot of it does feel very samey. I think is the problem. You know, I think there's like very few like great like sort of fantasy films and like stories, and I mean there's loads, but like there's very few that I kind of like resonate with, and I'm not that arsed about seeing like more elves and dwarves and wizards and stuff.
Yeah, and like weird creatures and
exactly.
There's a lot of that in The Witcher.
Yeah, and it's weird because that kind of like carries across to games like. You know, I mentioned like Elden Ring. Like again, I appreciate like the art design, the world building, and the lore and stuff. But I'm not like, you know, that's not enough to sort of keep me just playing it and persevering with it. Skyrim, like those games, I've never actually really got into. Again, they're just like, sort of too big and a bit too. I think Fallout's the same. I guess I don't really like that. It's not crazy on the way that they're developed, the way that they sort of play and the style of them, but the fantasy elements don't really do that much for me in that. I think the dragons are cool, but that's about it. And yeah, so I think I don't know why I feel like I need to play the Witcher game before I watch the show. I think I just feel like I'll enjoy it more that way. I do intend to watch it because I generally heard like positive things about it. I think in particular like the second series is supposed to get really good. But yeah, I'm not rushing to watch it because like I just I just don't really care that much.
No, 100%. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie. The only reason it was me and my bestie that watched it, and the only reason we watched it, was because Henry Cavill was in it.
Quite right. He is
Like,
some
not
boy.
even gonna lie.
A lot of love for Cavill.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, and on I guess the subject of like sort of least favourite ones, this will be talking more about movies. Actually, no, I'll go TV show first. I don't know if you're aware that they're currently there's a Halo TV series is on.
Oh right, no, I wasn't aware.
Yeah, it's on Paramount or something like that. I don't pay to watch it because I don't even think you can pay to watch it in the UK. It's one of those like streaming services that are like only available in the US, and then there's just like no means of watching it in the UK as far as I'm aware. But yeah, me and like my friends gave it a go, and the first episode was like almost like so bad it's good. It was like pretty hilarious at a lot of places, and we had a really good time with it. So we sat down, stuck the second episode on, and we got halfway through and turned it off. We were like, yeah, this show just like it just collapses so fast. And
oh no!
it commits the cardinal sin of they have the character take off his helmet in the first episodes. And
why
then,
would you bother watching episode 2? I wouldn't even have started it.
It's and like I wasn't crazy in the actor they chose and the direction they sort of go with it. The writing's not very good. And yeah, it's crazy because like they obviously feel they need to do that to like humanize him more, but it's nuts because like the latest game that came out, Infinite, I played that over sort of Christmas time, and they did a really good job in that. It's like they tell a sort of really emotive story, and they have the character in the armor the entire time, and they do a really good job just with like music and sort of like the way that they sort of like film certain like cutscenes with lighting and stuff like that, of actually making like this character who's just wearing like a helmet, like a suit, really sort of emotive at points. You have a really good sense of like what the character's thinking and feeling a lot of the time, and it's actually like quite powerful at points. And it's just funny having played that now watching the show, which just has no confidence in its ability to do that. It feels like you have to see this guy, and when you're just watching this rant, because in like the second episode you just like pretty much never got the suit on. And it just, you just suddenly feel like you're not watching something that's, you're not watching the show that you thought you'd be watching, basically. It just feels like you're watching a completely different, like, property. So yeah, I'm massively not a fan of that. That has just, like, completely been abandoned. Movie-wise, I also saw the Uncharted film a couple months ago.
Oh, the new one with Mark and Mark.
Tom Holland, and dear God. It's crazy because Mark Wahlberg has been attached. Basically, there's been an Uncharted movie in development for over a decade, and Mark Wahlberg has like constantly been attached. Every single development story that I've heard, I've always thought, why is he attached? He is the wrong person for this movie. He was originally going to be playing Nathan Drake, and then the movie's come out and he's playing Sully. He was the wrong choice for Nathan Drake. He's the wrong choice for Sully, and it just it did kill the movie.
Is he a producer or something?
He must be. I don't really know what's like happened there. How he's ended up just like stuck to, because he's not even played the games. He admitted in an interview that he hasn't even bothered to play them. He doesn't care about playing them. So I'm like, why have you just like stuck yourself to this property for over a decade?
So desperately clinging on, yeah.
Exactly. And yeah, no, I thought he was pretty rubbish in it. The movie was like, again, like so bang average, but I genuinely got annoyed while watching it because of just like the fact that I really do like the games and all the sort of departures the movie makes. Again, I understand the need to make changes when you're adapting something, but like you don't need to change the main characters completely. That feels like a bad move to make, and again it's sort of like what Halo did, and it feels like it's what Uncharted did. The characters are a big part of the reason I've been excited to see these things like adapted onto like a big screen, and it's just it's upsetting when they just like completely miss the mark on them. Anyway, moving on. Are there any that you would like to see? So any games that you think would maybe make for like good adaptations?
I think obviously we've kind of spoken about it briefly, but I think my thoughts were very similar to yours in terms of like Assassin's Creed, a TV show.
Yeah.
It's definitely ripe for like, it could be like an anthology series, so you could take the different games like Origins one season and then Valhalla the next season, whatever. I think there's those games, especially like the newer games, are such the worlds are so detailed, and they're like gorgeous as well. So that it would be just so nice to see in like a kind of in a TV show, just things like that. I think like we were saying, there's enough of a narrative for there to be like a story there, and then there's obviously, like you were saying, that they need to adapt things for TV shows. You can't. I don't think there's any point in having like almost like a run through of a game if you're gonna make a TV show. Why did you bother making a TV show? So I think there's scope there to like adapt things and change things and drop characters or whatever when necessary. I think as well, like the fight scenes and things like that in Assassin's Creed are always really cool. So I think that could, like we were talking about Arcane, one of my favourite things about that was the fight scenes, because they just looked really, really cool. I feel like you could get the fight scenes in an Assassin's Creed adaptation could be really cool. I think definitely live action though. What would you think?
I completely agree. I had Assassin's Creed written down because even though it's been adapted, I think it's, like you say, it's so perfect for a TV show, and like you say, like, do an anthology, and they could even, if they really want to, they could even have their beloved present day character, but use them, use them like they do. Use them like they do in the sort of like games where, maybe you have like a scene in episodes that's just sort of like continues that sort of like narrative, and then you use them to sort of like as a sort of springboard for each anthology season. But I think it feels like there's so much scope for that, and it would be genuinely exciting in the same way that, like, you look forward to seeing where they're going to set the next game. You'd be able to have that with the show where you don't know where like the next series is going to be set, and you look forward to them sort of like building up this world and this sort of like cast of characters and they get away with, because they get away with like getting to recast the actors and stuff like that, because they kind of do that. They did that with the film, and they kind of do that with the game, where they have like the same character model for like you and your ancestors.
It could be good as well in terms of even just like something really simple like inclusion, because obviously there's Egyptian characters and Greek characters and Vikings, and then I think as the original ones there in Italy. So it could be really interesting. It would be really interesting if they went out and got casts from the specific places. Just be a bit more interesting to watch, I think.
Absolutely, I completely agree, and it would just add a sort of like really nice colour to the show. If they really took it seriously and sort of did the research and everything, I think it would come out really strong. I think you could have. There's a lot of like. There is a sort of like historical accuracy that I think the games have to a degree. There's obviously a lot of like fiction in there, but I remember reading articles and stuff before about the fact that the development team do put like a lot of time and effort into like actually researching like the periods and stuff, and I just feel like it would be a really cool thing to explore each series. And like you say, if they had like actors from like their sort of respective cultures and countries, then it would just add another layer of like, it'd be interesting because you would be watching it more for like. You could have like a couple big names maybe as like main characters, but you could have like some really interesting like, newly discovered actors or actors that maybe exist in the periphery that don't usually get to feature in like sort of budget shows like this.
Definitely. Another one I thought would be difficult to adapt, but I think it could be done in the right hands, is Crash Bandicoot. I feel like if you. And my argument for this is that if I was going to adapt it, I would make it more of like a kind of Family Guy type show, because I feel like when you were playing the game, even when you were young, Crash was a bit cheeky, do you know what I mean? Like, he was a bit, when you were watching it, you were a bit like, should you be doing this as a child's game?
I think I totally buy into that pitch, actually. That'd be brilliant if you sort of had an edgy adult humor-esque Crash Bandicoot adaptation.
Yeah, you would definitely need someone who knew what they were doing and someone who really knows comedy, because it could be very like there's a lot of scope for it to go horribly wrong in that sense. But
Yes,
I
it
feel like
is.
if it worked, it would be really. I feel like it could be really funny. As I say, and it would be good, like even just pure nostalgia for like people who played it when they were young. Yeah, because people who played it when they were young are now adults. So do you know what I mean? You could watch it as an adult TV show. So yeah,
I could,
that's my pitch.
yeah, I think
Send money.
honestly, I'd happily give you money for that. I think that's absolutely brilliant. I never in a million years occurred to me, but I'm so there for it. And I think you're right with like the fan base now being older is pretty much perfect. Like that, those are the people that would be most interested in it. You wouldn't really have. I'm sure, like if you had like a film or a show that was aimed at kids, there would be kids that would be interested in it, but they're not really.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have that like same sort of like devotion to the IP. So yeah, no, I'm with you on that. One I had written down, which was in active development for a while and then got killed off by I think Watchmen of all things. Weirdly, there's a video game series called BioShock, which I don't know if you've ever heard of.
I've heard of it. I haven't played it, but I've heard
Yeah,
of it.
they are like I played like a couple of the games over the years, and then last year I got like the BioShock collection and actually just like played through them all in order with like their sort of DLC, and they are incredible. They're like so good in terms of like world building, in terms of like art style, in terms of like narrative as well. Like they're genuinely like some of the best written like games you'll ever find. And the sort of first two are set like in this underwater city, but it's after it's all sort of collapsed, and it makes like it has there's really interesting like sort of philosophical points to make and stuff. And then the third one, Infinite, is set into like a city in the sky, and again has like loads of sort of like commentaries and stuff that it makes. But they were actually, I think it was Gore Verbinski of Pirates of the Caribbean fame, was attached to direct a movie around about the time, not long after the first game came out, because it was a sort of instant hit, and he wanted to make it a horror, because there is a sort of like horror element to the games. And yeah, he wanted to make it this like really expensive, like big budget horror movie. And then I think Watchmen came out, didn't make nearly as much money as the studio hoped, and it kind of killed off, because studios were already a bit apprehensive about throwing like loads of money at something that was going to be like 18 or R rated, and I think that just like completely scared them off, and it's such a shame because like I think it would have been like I would love to have seen what they would have done. I think that, again, there's some really really like interesting like iconic characters and sort of designs and enemies and stuff, and even just like elements of the world in BioShock that and the narrative I think could be told really nicely, and sort of like even if you just like straight up adapted the game in like a sort of 2 hour film. So I am forever gutted that didn't happen, and I would love to see. I'd love to see someone try again. I think there's like so much scope, especially with Infinite, and all the sort of like narrative doors that opens up. I think there's so much scope for like a BioShock film or a series. And then the other one that I sort of had written down, which I kept thinking of when I was watching Arcane, is the video game series Dishonored, which I also played really recently, because the second one in particular, the art style of it is just gorgeous, and is actually quite similar at a lot of points to like the art style of like Arcane.
I haven't even heard of it, to be honest.
It's good. It's like kind of like a sort of stealth game where you get like sort of superpowers, and so you can like possess animals to sort of sneak around. You can like teleport and things like that. It's good. It's actually really fun. And again, it builds a sort of interesting. The world's like it's almost like sort of like slightly steampunky, Victorian sort of setting, but it's not like over the top steampunk. It feels just a bit more. It's almost like it's quite bleak. The world. It's almost like a Victorian sort of like workhouse aesthetic. So everyone everything's quite miserable, but it actually works really well for sort of what they do. So yeah, that's one that I think again there's a lot of scope for, because it has an interesting world, characters, and I can totally see them pulling off a series in the vein of like Game of Thrones or Arcane, even though those are two completely different shows.
Very different, yeah.
But I can see it landing somewhere between. So again, moving on, are there any that are coming out or in development that you are interested, or even any ones that have come out that you are on your list to check out?
One of the ones I read about just at random was, and I think mentioned the game, but they're making a TV show of the game Fallout.
Are
Have you
they?
heard about it?
I did not know about this.
Do you know who's attached to it?
No.
Jonathan Nolan,
Really?
aka the man who brought us Westworld.
Yeah. That is incredible. Okay, I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, the minute, because my fiance Ryan, he's been playing Fallout a lot, and it just kind of caught my eye, like Fallout, and was kind of reading it to be like, oh, so I could tell him, oh, by the way, there's a TV show, and then I saw Jonathan Nolan, and I was like, ooh, now I'm interested. I feel like it's in such good hands.
I'm so curious to see what you do with that.
Yep, it's in such good hands with him. I feel like this kind of, I don't know a huge amount about the game, but it's kind of like post-apocalyptic. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I feel like he would. Obviously, we've both watched Westworld, and it's just amazing. And I think it's different enough that there's a lot of scope for him to just do something different. But I didn't read a lot about it because there wasn't a lot of info on it. But I really hope he takes it down like a very kind of serious route.
Yeah.
Similar
Absolutely.
to Westworld.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote down just specifically for you, Sam. Yeah, so it said it was moving ahead in January of this year, but there's like no release date or anything, unfortunately.
Upsetting, but still, I'm very, very hyped for that.
Yeah,
Thank you for,
I think
for
it's
bringing that to my attention.
I think it's going to be like an Amazon Prime thing,
Okay.
but which probably means that the episodes are going to be super long, but that could be really good.
I mean, if it's Jonathan Nolan, he can take as long as he wants per episode.
Exactly,
I trust it.
100%.
He'll use
Another one I read about, funnily enough, and I'll tell you my justification on why it's on my list. It was Resident Evil, and I was reading about it, and I think from what I understand, the game is Japanese. I feel like if the TV show was Japanese, it could be amazing because Japanese are so good at horror. And we had a whole podcast about Japanese horror, and I feel like I feel like it could be so good. They could make it so like not gimmicky, like we were talking about. The movies are quite like almost campy. Do you know what I mean? Like in that way,
they are
I feel like maybe like a Western director or whatever might be inclined to kind of go that way. But I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like if it was actually made in Japan by Japanese filmmakers and stuff, there's scope for it to be so good and for it to be so scary.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. Actually, I would love to see like a proper J-horror Resident Evil series.
That'd be so good. Although I do think that's just a pipe dream. I think I've just seen Resident Evil and I've made that up in my head. Because there wasn't a huge amount of info about that. But we can always dream.
We already live in a timeline with a Jonathan Nolan Fallout adaptation. Maybe a J-horror.
Exactly.
Resident Evil's too much to kind of have both.
Exactly.
Fair. No, that is like, again, I totally see the appeal there. Was there anything else you had written down?
Another one I had written down was, although now I have no memory of writing it down, a TV show just called Pokemon.
Okay.
I assume it's like a new one they're bringing out. But I feel like I've written that because I feel like that would be more just nostalgic reasons that I'd be watching that, not because I had any particular interest in Pokemon. Do you know what I mean? I was never, even when I was young and watching it, I was never very good at identifying the Pokemon or anything like that. I just kind of liked it. I always liked, what was his name? Brock. He was my favourite.
Yeah, Brock's good.
But, yeah.
All love for Brock.
Other than that, obviously the other
fair.
obvious one was Arcane Season 2.
Yeah.
Or that's just for reasons we discussed last time.
Exactly. Yeah, no, fair. I'm hyped for that as well. I had a lot written down for this one. Ones that are out that obviously like I've not seen but have heard good things about. You know, The Witcher obviously mentioned before. There's the Cuphead show, which I know nothing about, but again have just heard positive things. That's just come out. And another one that I've been hearing great things about for years is Castlevania. In fact, I was originally toying between either doing that instead of Arcane. just because again I've only ever heard great things, but because there's 3 seasons of or 4 seasons of Castlevania, I was like, I don't want to pick something that has like multiple seasons if we're not going to discuss all the seasons, and I was like, I'm not going to ask you to watch like 4 seasons of Castlevania, so I went for Arcane in the end, but yeah, it is on my radar of ones to check out. I haven't really played the games, but again, I've always heard great things about them, so there are probably games that I would check out at some point as well. Ones that are like in development that are coming out. There's the Last of Us TV series. I mentioned absolutely loving the game, and it's a very like sort of like narrative heavy game. So I think like I'm very interested in seeing how they adapt it. Not 100% convinced by the casting, same as I was with Uncharted, but I'm less offended with Pedro Pascal.
No Marky Mark, so.
Yeah, exactly. There's no one that's actually like actively putting me off. Another couple of adaptations that I'm interested in seeing, pretty much because of the casting. There's a Borderlands movie coming out.
Okay.
Are you aware of Borderlands?
I know of the game, yeah. I remember actually my pal, when the newest one was coming out, someone at her work took the day off for the game coming out.
Fair
So
enough.
that's kind of how I know about it.
My brother is obsessed with it.
Yeah?
I played like a little bit of the first one and a little bit of the second one. I've never really been like crazy into it. I've always heard good things, so I'll probably revisit it at some point. But yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Kate Blanchett that's in the movie. Yeah, it's really weird casting, and Kevin Hart as well. So yeah, that's what I mean for casting
What a
alone.
bizarre
I'm like,
pairing.
yeah, exactly. So for like casting alone, I'm like, okay, you've got my attention. I will, at the very least, I'm looking forward to seeing the trailer, just to see what's going on with it. I think they filmed it. Another one has just been delayed. It was supposed to be coming out this December and is now coming out, I think, in March or April of next year. Which just I don't think it's going to be very good. But the casting is just so like out there that I have to kind of like know what it's about. And that's the Mario movie. Have you seen
With Chris Pratt?
Of Chris Pratt and Jack
Yeah.
Black and I think it's not Jordan Peele but Key, isn't it? Is it Key?
Oh,
Michael Key?
Michael, aye.
Yeah, he's in it. Like, yeah, the casting is just like, and Charlie Day, I think, as well. It's just the casting is just like insane.
That's bizarre. I don't even know, because I don't even know what they're thinking doing that movie.
I know. Well, have you ever seen the one from the 80s?
I haven't, but I've certainly seen a lot of things about it.
Yeah, I'm the same. Like, I think I've maybe seen bits of it on TV, but yeah, I mean, it literally, like, Nintendo refused to adapt any of their properties into a movie again for like decades because of
I feel like they're going to be, once this movie comes out, I don't have high hopes for it, so I feel like they might have a recurring thought like, why did we do that again?
Yeah, they might have made the history repeating itself.
Yeah.
I don't like, again, Mario's a weird one because there's not really much there in terms of like narrative and character, so it is actually, even though it's like such a big IP, I don't think it's an easy one to adapt, but it'll be definitely interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm absolutely dying to see how Chris Pratt, like, is he going to put on an accent? A question on everyone's lips.
Yeah, exactly. I'm also very interested to see his take on the character.
Yes.
It will be an interesting one. Another one I had written down, and this one hasn't even actually been confirmed, but I would be quite interested in seeing it, is Jak and Daxter. I absolutely love those games. They're Naughty Dog games, sort of PS2 era. And the director of Uncharted, despite all my issues with that, actually said that if Uncharted does well, he'd love to do a Jak and Daxter movie, and Uncharted has done well, so I very much hope that like that gets developed, because at the very least, the franchise is stagnant for decades now, so it'd be nice to actually see like something new in there. I saw a comment actually where someone said, I don't know if you know anything about Jak and Daxter, but someone actually suggested they reuse the casting of Uncharted and have Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland as like the sort of two main characters, and weirdly enough, I actually think that would be better casting than their roles in Uncharted.
Oh yeah.
So I would actually be okay. I think on a level I would actually be okay with that. But yeah, that's just one that I just massively love the games, so I'm quite interested in seeing what they would do with a film adaptation. I don't really believe it would be good. It's got quite a weird sort of art style and stuff, and there was a really interesting sort of like story, and again, a surprisingly interesting world that was built as well. But I feel like it won't translate super well to a live action film. But I'm still curious to see what they could do with it.
Yeah, fair.
Other ones that I had written down, Mass Effect. Those games were gorgeous. They're like very, almost like slightly Fallouty in the sense that you have these like worlds that you're sort of a sci-fi game. You go to different planets, but you get to make these choices. You have like dialogue wheels, so you sort of choose what your character says, and there's moments where you can choose how they act. And there was like a sort of like morality system, and they were quite good because the choices you made in one game basically carried through to the sequel and then to the third one. But genuinely, you got really invested, and you had characters that could die, sort of all the time and stuff, and so you kind of like the more you put into those games, the more you got out of it. But again, they had like a really, really, really like rich world that was sort of developed, and it was quite political in a lot of ways. So I can see a film or a show in particular doing a really, really good job of like adapting that material, because again, it just feels like it was very, very like dialogue heavy. So it just feels like it would work quite nicely as like a show. And then I had ones like Gears of War, which I'm not even that crazy on those games. John DiMaggio is forever brilliant. I think me and a friend actually just finished playing Gears of War 5, and we suffered through the game more than anything else. But again, like I think I just like the sort of world that it's built, and I'd be interested in seeing what they do with it. It could be quite. Again, I just think there's a lot there visually to sort of draw from. I like when there's like, you have like nicely sort of designed enemies, designed main characters. Sort of like there is like a sort of world that's built. There's like a sort of sci-fi-ness to it. I think it could be quite interesting to explore. I think the writing would need to be a bit better than. I think the writing for the fifth game was decent, but for the earlier games in particular, it wasn't that great. So if they got good writers, then it could be interesting. But yeah, those were like the main ones. There's other things like Portal and stuff as well, but I know like nothing about what they're actually doing with it, and that's one that the game is so good that I don't think, as we said before, watching someone struggling to solve puzzles isn't that entertaining.
Yeah, so. I don't know how you would adapt that, to be honest. Although that's pretty much what the TV show Sherlock was, so, and that works.
That's a very good point, actually, yeah. I'd be up for a Sherlock-style Portal film. And then, I guess, lastly, moving sort of swiftly on, is there any of the reverse that you are a fan of? Are there any shows that have been adapted into games that you absolutely love?
So this is going to be like, this is going to show my true colours as me as a gamer. Because honestly, the game is so good, and that is, of course, Simpsons Hit and Run.
That's written down in mine as well.
Yeah, it's so good.
I love Simpsons Hit and Run.
I don't know anyone that's played Simpsons Hit and Run that doesn't love it.
100%. It's everyone has such an adoration for that game.
It's so good. I feel like it was kind of like peak Simpsons as well. So like it's not like that horrible kind of newie that we spoken about last time. Would you play it on console or PC though?
Console? What about you? You PC?
I would PC it.
Really?
Hit and Run, yeah, I would. And I think that's purely nostalgia because like when it first came out and it was in that box and it had like 4 discs that you had to install. So that was how I was always used to playing it. So
see, I had it on PS2, so.
No, I actually bought it. I found it in a charity shop once, and I bought it for my laptop, and I would just sit there and play it for ages.
Quite right.
It's so good.
Yeah, I would definitely. That's definitely one that if I ever dug up PS2, I would absolutely stick that in and give it a go because it's just so much fun, that game.
Yeah, it was like the perfect level of difficulty as well, where you had to, like, some of the times you had to fight to get your win, but you would normally always get it, you know what I mean? Like, it was still fun. You didn't ever really get the rage with it.
Completely agree. Good choice.
But yeah, Simpsons Hit and Run was up there. I think that's generally, other than that, I was kind of struggling for actual games that I've played. I remember my dad played a lot of, like, the CSI games that they brought out. Which I think is such, like, it worked really well. There's so many spin-offs of CSI, so they had so many opportunities for games. So from a money-making standpoint, that was a very good idea. not something that I would have played, but yeah, I think other than that, I've got one that I would like to be turned into a game, and that is
Okay.
of course Westworld.
Yeah, that would be, Westworld game would be phenomenal. I bet it could also verge on like infringing on the points that, or I guess supporting the points that the show makes.
Yep, 100%. I feel like now though, because you've got those games that like learn from how you play them, that's just absolutely perfect for Westworld.
Yeah.
Although I feel like it could be very much one of those moments where when you're halfway through the game, you're like, oh god, is this the person that I am? It
Yeah.
could be it could be very like damaging in that way. But
Well, a really interesting one is, have you played Red Dead Redemption?
I haven't, no, but I've heard it's
No.
really good.
Yeah, the second one is one of the best games ever made, like hands down. And that came out. So I got that when I was in Manchester, and also as I was playing it, was watching season 2 of Westworld. So there was like
'Cause,
some interesting.
Is there not the guy that does the voice for the character in Red Dead? Is he not in Westworld?
He might be, actually. I wasn't aware of that.
I think
That would
I'm
be-
sure someone told me that.
I can see that being the case. That's really strange. I need to look into that. But yeah, the like what the second one does narratively is astounding. Like, it's one of the best like stories that's sort of been told in the game. But it is interesting because like most people that play it seem to have the same sort of experience where they start playing it and they're excited to be a cowboy and they run around and they do loads of terrible things, and then like the more you play the game, but I think because it's like such a realistic world, you start to act. You just sort of find yourself acting more and more like honourable, and you kind of like people have talked about it as like, as like a gamer, you have your own like personal character arc that you go on while playing it, where you don't
That's
even realize
amazing.
it's happening, but you develop like a conscience because
That
like
was
you
like,
start.
did you watch that Bandersnatch Black Mirror, and did you
I
like
did, yeah.
play along kind of thing? It was very much like that as well. I remember making a snap decision, and I was like, kill the dad. And then
Yeah.
the minute it happened, I was like, oh my god, I shouldn't have done that. And I was trying to do everything in my power to like reverse it, but I was watching it with my bestie, and she was like, that was you. That's on you. You killed this dad.
That's
I was like, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You kind of you do it for the curiosity of it, and then you do it, and you're like, you start to feel guilty, and you're like, actually, this isn't as fulfilling as I thought it would be.
100%. I was like waiting for the knock at the door for the police.
Yeah. So I'd say right now, like the Red Dead Redemption 2 is probably like the closest thing we've got to like a Westworld game, because you do kind of like have that. It's so realistic in so many ways that like it does sort of succeed as that like Westworldy simulation, where you're like in the Wild West. But yeah, no, fair. I like that pick for like one that you would have. I would love to see a Westworld game.
My thinking on that one as well is I just want as much Westworld in my life as I can get. So I'm like,
Absolutely.
why not again?
I'm so with you. Yeah, no, good pick. Again, there's not tons of these that I've really played. One that I have played a little bit of, and I've only ever heard really good things. One which you would probably like. Is there's supposed to be a really good game of The Walking Dead.
All right, okay.
And-
I think my dad actually played that as well. He's a big fan of the TV show as well, so.
Yeah, well, I think they've done loads of different adaptations, like games of The Walking Dead. I think most of them are meant to be quite crap, but there's one it's a studio called Telltale Games, and it's very much like, again, that kind of it's their style is like quite sort of like specific. Like I think you can even get it for like your phone, or for like your tablet. The Walking Dead game, because it's kind of like almost like a sort of comic-y sort of like art style, and you have like limited control over the characters at points, but it's all about like you're making these like story-based decisions. So you decide like if a character goes into a building, you sort of decide what like route they take. I think, and like maybe when they meet another character, you kind of decide like how you choose like a thing that they say. So it's
like
all
if they're
about
friendly or.
Yeah, exactly. So whether to trust them or not, I think, and it's all about like. It's supposed to be. It's, for everything I've heard, is that it does a really good job of like building this story that has like sort of like strong emotional beats. But again, because you're making these decisions, you do feel like invested and involved, and they do sort of resonate more. So yeah, that's one that I've always heard is worth checking out. I know that Telltale also they've done like loads now. They did like a Game of Thrones one, which I think was supposed to be good. think they even did like a Minecraft one, which is really weird. I know. But yeah, though, like I've also heard another one that I've not played, but I've heard is really good. There's a South Park game called The Stick of Truth. Again, yeah, like I said, I sort of had my South Park phase, and that's I've not really gone back to it. I think if I was more of like a South Park fan, I probably would have got it and played it, because again, I've always heard really good things. I think it captures like the sort of humor of the show. Apparently, it's like quite fun that way. When I was doing research for this, there was a bunch of games that I had no idea existed that just seemed absolutely mental. So I wrote them down just surely to mention it. Like, for instance, did you know there's a Little Britain video game?
No, I did not. What do you even do in that game?
I don't even know. I didn't like click on it or like do any research into what the game actually how it plays. I just saw that there was a Little Britain game, and I was like, that is so bizarre. Another one that exists that like completely stopped me in my tracks. There's a Desperate Housewives game.
Oh my god. I dread to think what that game is like. The TV show was the craziest thing I've ever seen. Like, that's hysterical.
I know. Yeah, I know. The TV show is, like, I've seen a good couple seasons of it, and it's I have a lot of love for it, to be honest. But yeah,
it's if that's the mood that you're in, it's perfect. Do you know what
exactly.
I mean?
But yeah, I can't see no point I've ever gone, oh man, if this was a video game.
Yeah, here's what I would have done if this was a game.
Another one that I've not seen, but I think you've mentioned being a fan of, is a Grey's Anatomy game.
I did see that actually, and in my head I was already imagining what I would want it to be like. I would just want it to be chock full of surgeries.
It would just be Operation, but like digital, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And like that would actually be so good. Now I want to look into it, because you could like try and diagnose the patient as well if you could like work out their symptoms and stuff. Yeah,
there's a lot of scope for that one.
Yeah.
And then the last one I saw that, like, again, I just like, why has someone made a game of this? Is The Office, which is just exactly like
I don't even know what to say to that.
I know.
Like.
Nothing about that sounds in any way appealing.
No.
So yeah, those are some of the mental ones that I saw. But yeah, and I think again, there don't really seem to be like heaps that are that good. I think there's a Buffy one that's supposed to be decent, but I'm not gonna play a game from like the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Or at least not a game that's supposed to be decent. I'll play like a great game from the early 2000s, but I feel like the Buffy game is probably like good in its time, more than like great now.
And you're going to be a lot less forgiving had you played it at the time of like the graphics and things like that.
Exactly. I'm kind of surprised that there's not more like. I think like shows like Doctor Who and even like Star Trek, I'm surprised there's not like more good games in those universes, because they seem like so sort of ripe for video gaming. And I know there have been like hundreds of Star Trek games, but I don't think there's been like, you have to play this Star Trek game. So I'm kind of surprised by that. But yeah, it's interesting that they also doesn't seem to be like great adaptation. There doesn't seem to be much greatness in the way of like the reverse adaptation.
That's true, yeah. I feel like Game of Thrones is another one. Like, obviously you mentioned there's meant to be that kind of one game that's good, but that's a game that you could make a really good game out of. Do you know what I mean?
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, it seems perfect for like a sort of open world fantasy game, and it is quite surprising that no one's just like done that.
It could be cool as well, because at the beginning you could like choose your house, or which house you kind of like were, who was your lord, things and stuff like that, and then in that case it would be different for every player.
Exactly. Yeah. You could do a lot with it, and actually, like that'd be an open world game that you would love to sort of explore. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I guess since the show ended and all of its like popularity just died, we're probably never going to get it now.
That's true. Well, there's hope if the prequel series. If people enjoy that, there's maybe some hope.
That's true, yeah. I guess it would be. That starts in a couple of months as well. So interesting to see how that one does. But I guess that is a podcast for another day.
Yep.
So I think with that we can wrap up here. Kathryn, thank you as ever for the discussion.
Thank you very much.
I enjoyed that one. And to anyone who watched, thank you very much. Next month it is Kathryn's turn. So we'll be, next time joining us, it will be her content-based episodes, which I am very excited to start. And yeah, until then, take care.
See you
Farewell.
later.